Here.
Steve Julesgard.
Present.
Rich Lahar.
Here.
Christine Miskowski.
Present.
Lauren Miller-Rogan. Adriana Padilla.
Here.
Joe Panetta.
Here.
Al Roulette. Marvin Souther.
Here.
Jonathan Thomas.
Here.
Art Torres.
Here.
Carol Watson.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we are going into the Application Review Subcommittee. At this point, we have two items. The first one is consideration of applications submitted in response to clinical trial stage project program announcement CLEANS 1, 2, and 3. As always, a presentation from Dr. Sombrano. Gil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me put this in presentation mode and we'll get started. So good morning, all. So this initial presentation is for the clinical program and our latest rounds recommendations from the grants working group. As always, we begin our meetings, including our review meetings, with a declaration of our mission, so we know why we are all here. And so our mission, of course, is to accelerate world-class science, to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. This is a update on our current budget allocation for the clinical program. We just started this out in July, so we're still early on with this budget. We have $7.8 million that have been approved thus far. Today, the one application being considered would add $6.9 million, and we have remaining after that $147.3 million, should that be approved. This is a reminder of the scientific scoring system that's used for clinical applications, which is based on a scale of 1, 2, or 3. A score of 1 means that the application has exceptional merit and warrants funding. It might have some minor recommendations that are made by the grants working group, but in general, it's not something they would want to see again. A score of 2 is one that needs improvement. Those applications will normally go back to the applicant for revisions, and the grants working group gets another opportunity to look at those. Those with a score of 3 are sufficiently flawed that we don't accept those back for at least 6 months. The review criteria that are utilized to come up with a score are based on these 5 questions. Does the project have the necessary significance and potential for impact? Does it have a good rationale? Is it well planned and designed? Is it feasible, including having the appropriate team and resources to carry it out? And lastly, does the project uphold the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion? The composition of the grants working group includes several members, the core scientific working group members that conduct the scientific evaluation and provide expertise from a variety of backgrounds, including disease area, regulatory, CMC, and so on. And so these members score all the applications and provide the scientific score. We also have our patient advocate and nurse grants working group members who are also members of this board. They conduct the DEI evaluation. They provide a patient perspective on the significance and potential impact of the project and oversight on the project. So these members provide a DEI score on all applications, as well as a suggested scientific score. We often will also have scientific specialists who are non-voting members who we use to fill in knowledge gaps among the panel. And so they may provide the scientific evaluation and provide an initial but not a final scientific score. All right, so before we go on into the application details, I'm just going to highlight the potential conflicts that may exist with the application, or those who have identified a conflict. Those that have the red asterisk are members of the Application Review Subcommittee, so just be mindful about not speaking during the discussion for this particular application. So this application is entitled Phase 1 Clinical Research Program for a Functional Cure of HIV with an in vivo gene therapy. This is a gene therapy that targets latent HIV-infected cells. And the goal of this proposal is to complete a Phase 1 clinical trial to assess the safety of this therapeutic. The amount requested from CIRM is 6.85 million. The applicant is providing 7.23 million in co-funding. Some background on HIV. There's approximately 38 million people worldwide infected and living with HIV. There's an estimated 1.5 million new cases of HIV that were reported in 2020. The standard of care, as many of you may know, is antiretroviral therapy, or ART, which is successful in controlling the infection, but it does require lifelong adherence, and it is not a cure. And even with the ART therapy, the HIV will persist in the body in the form of integrated proviral DNA in latently infected cells. And so this proposed therapy would offer the potential to effectively cure patients of HIV infection by targeting and removing that integrated proviral DNA in latently infected cells. Why does this qualify for CIRM? This is a therapeutic candidate that is a gene therapy targeting the HIV-infected cells. All right, so programs within our existing active portfolio that maybe have some similarity to this project include these three that are listed. None are similar in the sense that none of these are gene therapy as the current proposal, and some are not necessarily just on HIV. So the first one, the CLIN2 at the very top, is for HIV-related lymphoma. It is an autologous gene-corrected hematopoietic stem cell therapy that would treat lymphoma in HIV-infected patients. We have a couple of projects, a CLIN1 and a CLIN2, that are using a CAR T-cell approach with different targets for HIV, with the goal to rid the body of HIV-infected cells. So those are the most closely related projects to the current proposal. The applicant has not previously received a CIRM award, so this would be the first for this particular applicant. So in summary, the recommendation from the grants working group is a score of 1, with 10 members giving it a score of 1, 3 giving it a score of 2, and 2 members giving it a score of 3. The DEI score is 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best possible score. The CIRM team recommendation is to fund this application in the amount of 6.85 million. And I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sembrano. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Not sure who was first there. Maria, did you get that sequence?
I think it was Marvin, and then I didn't know who.
Oh, Dan, I'll second.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Yes.
Anne-Marie.
Yeah, as always, thank you, Gil, for this presentation. We're particularly interested in the debate that may have happened. Can you tell us more about the people who didn't vote in favor or were borderline, just so we understand
Sure.
the nature of the debate? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think everyone agreed that the proposal itself was very good. Where the grants working group had a little bit of a struggle was in the overall potential benefit and safety to patients, just given that this is a gene therapy that may require high titers and the potential for serious adverse events. Given that this is a non-fatal condition, where they draw the line, I think, was part of the debate on how much risk is worth taking for this therapy. The other is that because it is an adenovirus therapy, some patients already may have antibodies against adenovirus, which would make it ineffective. And it would also, if you have one dose, will likely lead to the development of antibodies, and so a second dose would probably be unlikely to be effective. So those were the concerns that I think they were struggling with. They did feel, however, that the applicants have done a pretty good job of designing the trial and setting up the cohorts to account for those safety concerns, and think carefully and space apart each of the treatments so that there is enough time to understand the potential implications of giving this treatment to each patient.
Thank you, Gil, and I agree that the design of the trial seems to be adequate for what I've seen. Were there any dialogue around the potential value of the treatment in public health, in a field that, although absolutely there is no cure for HIV, we're still working on a vaccine at some point, at least to prevent, but there's multiple treatments that are available and that make HIV a long-term disease where people can live actually very well with this disease. And I'm not trying to minimize some aspects of it. It should be more available in developing countries, but a gene therapy, I'm not sure will be more available to people cost-wise by the time it's an accepted way of treating HIV, even curing HIV. Is that realistic?
Well, that was not particularly part of the debate at the grants working group. The grants working group certainly recognized that if this were successful, it would be highly impactful. Whether it was practical or realistically in the near term to have patients getting a gene therapy was not really discussed. It is certainly a good question, but not something that was discussed at length at the grants working group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Seeing none, do we have any comments from members of the public?
I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. In that case, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Anne-Marie Dulege,
No?
Mark Fisher-Colbury,
Aye.
Fred Fisher,
Aye.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Lauren Miller-Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Go on to the next item, excuse me, Aaron, which is consideration.
Oh, sorry. Can I interrupt a second? I
Yes,
believe
Aaron.
Carol Watson is not conflicted on this, so I think you can call for her vote.
Oh, thank you. Carol Watson. Carol? Okay. We can, she's not responding, so I think we can move on.
Okay, thank you. Second and last item for today's Application Review Subcommittee is consideration of applications submitted in response to discovery stage research projects program announcement, so-called DISC presentation from Dr. Sembrano. Gil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so these are the recommendations from the grants working group related to the DISC-0 program. And I'll just go over a few background slides related to this program. So the DISC Zero is brand new. It is a program that fits into our recurring set of opportunities in the discovery area. It is not specifically intended to feed into a product development pipeline, but rather it is intended to more broadly support basic research. So the purpose and objective of the program is the reinitiation of funding basic stem cell progenitor cell science and genetic research. It is to support rigorous studies addressing critical basic knowledge gaps or bottlenecks in the field of regenerative medicine. And of course, to advance the development of stem cell-based tools for innovation. So this program allows both for tool development as well as knowledge gap and bottleneck research. Projects that come into the DISC Zero opportunity should, as an outcome, culminate in the discovery or technology that would advance one or more of the following. Understanding the biology of stem cells that is relevant to human biology and disease, genetic research that's relevant to human biology or disease that pertains to stem cells or regenerative medicine. So there has to be a regenerative medicine connection to the genetic research. The development of human stem cells as a tool for biomedical innovation, and our greater applicability of regenerative medicine discoveries to communities representing the full spectrum of diversity. Some example activities of what we can support under this program would be basic research into stem cell or genetic research mechanisms as they relate to human biology, bottlenecks such as tissue targeting, immunogenicity or toxicity in the development of a stem cell-based therapy, understanding healthy and or diseased human cells through omics profiling or the development of human cell tissue atlases, mechanistic studies for rational design of stem cell-based treatments, investigation of stem cells or their derivatives as tools for a therapy or for innovation in some way, developing a model of disease or a disease in a dish, as it is often called, generation of omics data that could extend or validate the applicability of regenerative medicine to underserved racial or ethnic groups. So those are just some sample activities. So all applications coming in have to address one of these elements at a high level, a knowledge gap or bottleneck, or development of a tool that addresses the knowledge gap or bottleneck. The awards are for 3 years and up to 1 million in direct project cost. And we anticipate that this DISC Zero opportunity will occur every 6 months. So the process for taking in these applications and reviewing them included going through a positive selection process. This is something that we perform when we get a total number of applications that would exceed the capacity of the grants working group to review in a single session. So we do this, for example, with the DISC-2 and other discovery programs. And so what happens in the first stage, grants working group members, so the panel, including our patient advocate and nurse board members, conduct a pre-review of the applications and select which ones to advance to the full review. Once that is done, the CIRM president and CIRM staff examine non-selected applications to determine if any of those merit a full review, and those that remain are not considered any further. And so we received a total of 75 eligible applications for this first cycle, and a total of 45 advanced to the full discussion stage by the grants working group. The members of the panel, as I indicated in my previous presentation, include the scientific grants working group members who participate in the positive selection as well as scientific evaluation, and they score all applications on it and give it a scientific score. Our board members also participate in the positive selection. They provide a patient perspective on significance and potential impact and oversight on the process. they do not participate in any scoring at this level. And then our visiting specialists who, again, fill in some of the knowledge gaps that we may need on the panel during the course of the review. Unlike clinical, the discovery programs are scored on a scale of 1 to 100. And so a score of 85 to 100 means it's recommended for funding if funds are available. Those that score between 80 and 84 are not recommended, but those applications have been deemed to have sufficient merit by the grants working group to bypass the positive selection process in the next cycle if they revise and resubmit their application. So these are applications that are sort of borderline that they would like to see again, but that they really feel need some work before that they are comfortable recommending them. And then those that receive a score between 1 and 75 are not recommended for funding. And the score is based on the median from all the individual grants working group scores given by the scientific numbers. The review criteria are largely the same questions that we asked for clinical program. Some of the sub-bullets, if you will, and how they're applied for a discovery program are a little different, however, but nevertheless, it is focused on the overall significance and potential for impact, rationale, plan design, feasibility, and upholding the principles of DEI. So this is a summary table of the recommendations from the grants working group. As mentioned, there were 45 applications that were reviewed in the last session, and there were 11 that received a score of 85 or above that deemed them recommended for funding. The total applicant request from these 11 applications is about 15.6 million. The funds available are close to 34 million to support this program. And I will note that the budget is coming from the 21-22 fiscal year. So this is from the last year budget that we are catching up with this cycle of DISC 0. All right, minority reports. So you may know that under Prop 14, any application that is not recommended for funding by the grants working group, but which has 35% or more of the members scoring to fund the application, must include a minority report. And the way we do that is that we include it in the review summary and provide a synopsis of the opinion of the minority group for those applications. So in this particular cycle, there were no applications that qualified for a minority report. It seems that the grants working group in terms of their scoring reached a pretty general consensus of those that were recommended versus those that were not. So therefore, no minority reports. This slide is just to remind all of you on the Application Review Subcommittee who have an asterisk of conflicts that you may have with any one of the applications, as well as other members of the board in general who may be on the call today, just so you are aware that you may have a conflict with the application. So just be mindful of that. Let me then stop the share real quick, and I will show you the spreadsheet that has all of the applications listed in rank order. So give me 1 second to put that up. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So we have the 11 applications shown here that are recommended for funding, that range in score from 85 to 91, and then the remaining applications that are not recommended, although we do have many that are in the 80 to 84 that, should they revise and resubmit, will bypass positive selection at the next round. So Mr. Chairman, I pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Gil. Okay, this is one of these sequences where we're going to have multiple steps. First, I'm going to ask if anybody wants to elevate any projects currently not recommended for funding to the funding range. Secondly, if anybody wants to take any in the funding range and move it down to the not recommended range. Thirdly, we're going to have a vote on whether or not to not fund those in the not recommended range. And finally, a vote on the top projects to recommend for funding. Do we want to fund them or not? So that's the sequence. So first, are there any projects in the not recommended for funding range that any members of the board wish to elevate to the recommended range? Hearing none. Gail, if you could go back and show the thank you. Do we have any projects in the recommended range that any members of the board wish to move down to the not recommended range? Recommended range. Okay, hearing none on that. The third step is,
Actually, what you'll want to do is you'll want to take a vote now to close out that category.
close out the recommended range. Okay.
No, the not recommended range.
Right, well, that was my next step. So,
Okay.
so the next step is we need a vote on the, do we have a motion to not fund those projects in the not recommended range? Need a motion here.
So So moved. moved.
So moved.
I'm sorry, who was that? And I hope it's not a member who has a conflict.
I think it was me and Marv
Great, thank you.
and Mr. Fisher Colbury, a distant third.
Thank you. I'll have
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board on this motion?
I have a question, JT.
Yes, Joe.
Thank you. I should know this, but Gil said that the applications that score from 80 to 84 will have the opportunity to be upgraded and then will bypass the positive selection process. I don't remember what that means. If you could just refresh my memory.
Sure.
please.
So that means that it goes straight into the pool of grants that will be fully reviewed on the next cycle.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this motion from members of the board? Hearing none, do we have any public comment on this motion?
I do not see any hands raised, but I'll give it a second because I do see a couple of guests on, so. There are no hands raised, JT.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Aye.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
Fred Fisher,
Aye.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard. Steve? Are you on mute?
Yes.
Thank you. Ruth Lahara,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The last then consideration for this item is, do we have a motion to approve those projects in the recommended range?
So moved.
Moved by Fred. Is there a second?
Marv will second.
Mark.
Marv will second, and Mark again, a distant third.
Please,
Thank you.
gotta be faster.
But thank you for yes. Questions or comments from members of the board on this motion? Any questions or comments, or rather comments from members of the public?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you. In that case, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure, and remember to respond yes or no, except for those with which I have a conflict. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Anne Marie Delage,
Aye.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Elena Flowers,
Yes, except those for which I have a conflict.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Sorry, I skipped Fred Fisher. Fred Fisher,
Aye.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes, except for those with which I have a conflict.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye, except for those of which I'm conflicted.
Carol Watson,
Yes, except that I have a conflict.
thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria, and Gil, thank you to you and your team for the usual expert review on this brand new program, which adds a significant new element to our portfolio. So please, to all of those members of the review team, this is great to have and definitely augments the product line here. So thank you very much. That concludes the meeting of the Application Review Subcommittee. We're now on to public comment on any items in general. Do we have any public comment? Okay, hearing none. I think that that pretty much wraps it up. Our next, Maria, yes.
I was just going to say what you're going to say, but I'll let you say it.
Our next board meeting, which is a full board meeting, is on September 29th.
So we'll see you all again next week. It's action-packed.
Yes, so thank you all
How
for
exciting.
thank you all for your attendance and participation, and we look forward to reconvening next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Work on your voice.